What had all happened was exactly what was spoken by the prophets. This is exactly the work that God had given him to do. This was all a part of the plan and the purpose of God. You notice how they use the word must. It's that little word that indicates absolute necessity. The Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. This indicates that absolute necessity of what happened. The death and resurrection of Jesus were not accidents of history. His death was not bad luck or bad or evil karma or a cruel twist of fate or the result of a grand conspiracy. In a way it was, but it really wasn't that. The death and resurrection of Jesus was not an accident. His death was the purpose of God. And the word must tells us that it had to be just this way because nothing else, nothing less would have accomplished God's purpose. It's all a part of the glorious mystery that God has been working in the earth from the beginning. Evil and malice, hatred and unbelief had brought about the death of Jesus. And yet, in the midst of all this evil, and indeed through and by means of this evil, the purposes of God were being accomplished. So when wicked men put Jesus to death, it was the greatest of all sins, the greatest sin that's ever been committed. And yet, it was by means of this sin that the purpose of God to deliver the world from sin was accomplished. It was the culmination of a wicked plot by Satan to destroy the seed of the woman. And yet, in destroying Jesus, Satan only brought about his own defeat and destruction. He secured his eternal destruction by destroying the Son. In seeking to destroy the world, Satan had become an instrument in God's hands to save the world. That's the mystery that God was working out through his Son. Now you see, when you sit back and think through this, then it becomes not as hard to believe Romans 8:28. We have a hard time believing that when things go wrong and when you suffer and when terrible things happen. And I've read articles from Christians that say, don't quote Romans 8:28 to me, as if that's a horrifying thing to say, that God works everything together for good for those of his people. Why is that horrifying? Why does that sound to you as if it's trite somehow and just a pious statement that really is not helpful in the time of suffering? Why is that not helpful? I'm afraid the reason it's not helpful is because we don't believe it and we don't want to believe that. We like to feel victimized. We enjoy being the victim of these uncontrollable fates and wicked people and these unknown plots and these various things. It's the food, it's the weather, it's the climate change. You got to understand that. If you don't understand that, you're just completely out of it all. You don't realize the big problem that we're facing is caused by all these things out of our control. And therefore, if I quote Romans 8:28, you think it's being trite. We don't believe this because we don't believe the resurrection. And therefore, we can't believe that God works everything together for our good and his glory. Even bad things. Because if it was a good thing, we can say, oh, I know how this is going to work out. This is great, this is great. But if it's a bad thing, what do? Then you wonder, what in the world's gone wrong? Why would God let that happen? I don't understand. This is all wrong. This doesn't seem right. If he loves people, if he loves me, why would he do this to me? And you immediately challenge everything you know, or you ought to know, to be true. Romans 8:28 says no, even bad things, because everything includes bad things. Bad things are worked together for your good. Even the sins of others, you say. And Paul says, did I say everything? I think that's what I said, right? You know what the word everything means in the Greek? It means everything. Everything there is. Even the sins of others against you. Even the things that make you so angry you want to strangle them. God works those things together for good if you trust in Him. And then someone says, but even my own sins, that's what's killing me. It's not what other people have done, it's what I've done to myself. What about my sins? And Paul says, reread what I said. I said everything. Everything includes your sins. Everything includes what you have done that was inexcusable. What you did that is unspeakable. The very things that you want to forget and wish never happened, that's included in everything. And even those things will be worked together for your good. If God can turn the wickedness of men and the hatefulness of Satan to bring about the greatest blessing of all time, then He can turn your sins and the sins of others and the bad things that happen in life and the horrifying things that we wish never would happen that did happen anyway. He can turn all of those things